The moment I walked into the office, everything went silent. My old creative director froze. Right behind him, the logo I designed was still on the wall, uncredited. "I didn't expect the new owner so soon," he stammered. I smiled. "I don't want your job. I want the building." But what happened next will shock even those who thought they'd seen everything. First, let's go back to the beginning. The silence in the apartment that night wasn't just quiet. It was accusing. Every surface, every poster on the wall, every sketchbook tucked under the bed seemed to whisper the same thing. You weren't ready. The hum of the city outside felt distant, like the world had closed a door and left me behind. I sat cross-legged on the floor, laptop still open on the rejection email, the bright screen burning into the darkness like a cruel joke. I had built everything I had on belief. Belief in work, in passion, in skill. Belief that if you did good work, people would see it. That if you gave everything, someone would notice. But the truth is, they had noticed. And they'd taken what they needed, wrung it out of me, and moved on. There wasn't even a severance package. I thought of all the late nights I stayed back polishing pitch decks while others clocked out. Of the weekend, I missed my sister's wedding because our deadline got moved up. I remembered Brian, the creative director, saying, "You're the glue holding this design team together." I remembered believing him, and I remembered how he couldn't even look me in the eye when he let me go. That's what gutted me, not the firing, not even the humiliation. It was the realization that I had spent 3 years building something I didn't own. My ideas, my identity systems, my motion graphic prototypes, they belonged to a company that could erase me with a line in a spreadsheet. I didn't even save the files to my own drive. I had followed every rule, trusted every NDA, been a team player. And for what? And then there was my father. His voice echoed in my head, not angry, just smug. Coloring books. That stung more than I'd admit. Not because I believed him, but because, in that moment, I feared he might be right. I stared at the screen, at the glowing cursor. It blinked like a pulse, like it was daring me. I closed the laptop. This wasn't going to be the end of the story. But it was going to be the end of this version of me, the version who thought talent alone was a shield. That night, something broke. Not my dream. My illusion. There's a kind of silence that comes with obsession. Not peace, but pressure. A hum that never stops, like a low frequency only you can hear. That was my world for 2 years. No weekends, no vacations, just work and war prep. While the LinkedIn crowd performed their thought leadership soliloquies and reposted Forbes articles about resilience, I vanished from view. I made myself invisible. No posts, no comment threads, just a fake smile on the occasional Zoom call with some underfunded skincare startup or crypto app team that needed a logo yesterday and would pay in crypto tomorrow. I took every gig. I said yes to everything. I needed the money, but more than that, I needed the data. Every project was reconnaissance. Every interaction a lesson in failure and growth. I listened to burned-out CMOs vent about investor pressure. I watched founders unravel over $20K budget decisions. I learned who was bluffing, who was bleeding, and who was one Q4 away from collapse. But that was the surface game. What I really studied was leverage. At night, I read case law, M&A strategy, shareholder agreements, every startup post-mortem I could find. I didn't want to make another agency. I wanted to build something no agency could fight. I wanted to become a weapon, sleek, quiet, patient, one that wouldn't knock on the door but buy the building and change the locks. So I built Helix Ghost. On the surface, a boutique creative lab, agile, polished, artsy. Behind the curtain, a holding architecture built for acquisition. I partnered with 2 operators who knew how to spot distressed assets and negotiate backwards from desperation. We weren't branding companies. We were rescuing identities from their own founders. I spoke in soft tones to founders who hadn't taken a salary in 6 months. I asked questions like, "What would you do if you didn't have to fight anymore?" I wasn't buying products. I was buying their fatigue, and they sold it cheap. We gathered brands like a collector gathers secrets, quietly, anonymously. Until one day, my advisor dropped a deck into my inbox with no comment. But he didn't need to say anything. F.D. Axis, the agency that gutted me. Their valuation, plummeting. Their design team, hollow. Their leadership, posting platitudes while hemorrhaging clients. They didn't know who we were. The offer came from a holding entity wrapped in legal fog. But they knew one thing clearly. We were their only exit. So I smiled, signed, and 3 weeks later, I owned the agency that once called me expendable. I didn't walk in with fanfare, no entourage, no loud declarations, just a quiet presence in the very lobby I used to cross nervously, holding client mock-ups and praying the printer wouldn't jam again. But this time, the badge on my chest wasn't paper, it was power. The receptionist didn't recognize me. She offered the corporate smile, the one I'd mastered years ago when I was just another overworked designer pulling 12-hour shifts for a performance bonus that never came. Now, that same smile flickered with confusion when I walked past security without signing in. The air changed as I stepped into the bullpen. Conversations cut mid-sentence. Keyboards stopped clacking. Heads turned one by one like a slow domino of dread. I didn't need to say a word. My presence spoke volumes. Not rage, not arrogance, just precision. Brian was still there. Creative director, title intact, posture diminished. The man who once dismissed my ideas with a patronizing smirk now stood behind a desk that looked too big for him. His eyes locked on mine like a deer realizing too late that the lights were getting closer. I didn't realize the new owners would be visiting so soon. The tremble in his voice was subtle, but I caught it. A crack in the foundation. I walked past him, slow, deliberate, and stopped at the wall of framed campaigns, the same ones I had bled to build. My logo system, my grid, my typographic rules, all still here, slightly butchered, still mine. "It's good to see my work still here," I said without turning around. He didn't respond. "Don't worry," I continued. "I don't want your job." I turned to face him fully. "I want the building." He blinked, smiled awkwardly, like I was joking, but I wasn't. Within 72 hours, we gutted the core. Client contracts, terminated. Codebase, transferred. Team, evaluated. Talented staff were offered roles at Helix Ghost, better pay, flexible terms. The ones who had stayed silent when I was cut? Left behind. Executives weren't offered anything, just escorted out politely, like guests at a party that had run too long. Then came the press release. One sentence. Clean. Corporate. Helix Ghost acquires former creative agency and strategic talent consolidation. No drama, no vengeance, just business. But make no mistake, I bled in this place, and now I owned it. And for the first time in my life, the silence didn't feel like shame. It felt like justice. His voice came through the phone like it always did. Calm, neutral, a touch reserved, like every word cost him something. My father never raised his voice, but somehow he still managed to make it feel like a lecture. "Saw something about your name in a Forbes email. Said you acquired some agency, that the one that fired you?" I could almost see him leaning on the kitchen counter, mug in hand, scanning headlines between bites of toast. Detached, analytical, as if he were reviewing a stock, not the life of his only child. "Yeah," I said. "That's the one." A pause. Not dramatic, just long enough for something unsaid to settle in. Guess that art degree wasn't so useless after all. There it was, his version of a compliment, dry, measured, tied to outcome. Because in his world, nothing mattered unless it translated to control, ownership, results. And now I had all three. So, by his logic, I had finally arrived. But standing there, phone in hand, I felt no rush. No surge of vindication. Not the dopamine spike I'd fantasized about all those sleepless nights grinding through client edits and reading balance sheets under flickering desk lamps. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt done. For the first time in my adult life, I didn't feel the need to prove anything to him or to anyone else. That part of me had burned itself out, smoldered down to cold clarity. The victory wasn't the acquisition, the press release, or even the quiet panic in my old boss's eyes. It was the stillness I felt now. No more explaining, no more apologizing for my choices. He thought I'd won because I had money now, because I had a staff, a title. He didn't realize the win happened the moment I walked back into that building and didn't want to destroy it. I'd outgrown vengeance, outgrown the need to be seen. What mattered was that I'd created something no one could reduce to a line item, something that didn't need validation from resumes or parental approval. They'd fired me thinking they were cutting dead weight, but I didn't die. I multiplied. In the silence after the call, I didn't feel pride. I felt peace, because in a world built to consume you, I'd built something they couldn't steal, and that made all the difference.